Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And we're going to find out how we can do in the 2026 season over the next few episodes. Ownership still does not have very ambitious goals for us this year, just wants us to not suck completely and wants us to improve our team on base percentage. We do have some goals as far as improving our minor league system, boosting fan interest, acquiring a top player, and improving our international amateur fines over the next few years. Also want us to reach the playoffs within the next 3 seasons. That might be tricky as well. Taking a look at the preseason predictions here, and we're expected to go 78 and 84, which sadly would represent the best of the 3 seasons we've had here in Oakland. 177 in 2024, dipped back to 75 wins last season. So we've the first 2 years been in a pretty small range in terms of our performance, and the projections are similar this year. Not expected to have any of the top hitters or the top pitchers in the American League. My hope is that we can maybe do a little bit better than that, particularly if we do get Mason Miller back at some point. No guarantees that that is going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. But if we're able to get him back into the mix, that would certainly help. Quick look at player development as the season's getting started, and our minor league system ranks 12th out of 30 overall. But we've definitely made some improvements. When we're sitting here, we've got 7 top 100 prospects right now, led by Bertrand Albrighton, who we signed in international amateur free agency not that long ago, and Cruz Schoolcraft, who was our first-round pick last year. Those 2 gentlemen are our only top 50 prospects at this point. And I did get an interesting question from Stanley Rosella after the last episode. Asked me why I haven't been using the stopper roll in this playthrough. And the stopper roll is something that I do believe in generally. The real reason I'm not is that I don't really know that I've got a pitcher I like that much who's kind of a very good pitcher with solid stamina and also above average health and wellness. And I just don't really have a pitcher that fits that role that I feel real strongly I want to pitch perhaps 60 or 70 innings more than the others in my bullpen. If I had to pick somebody, I'd probably go with Gabe Spire. Only normal in terms of his injury proneness, only 30 stamina. He was a nice pitcher for us last year after we picked him up off of waivers right when the season was getting underway. Clearly, we brought him back this year for $2.3 million, even though he's now in his arbitration season. So we like him, but I don't know that I like him enough to put that burden on him that would likely increase his chance of injury. But certainly if a Spire or a Chase Lee or an AJ Puck really excels in the early stages of this season, maybe we'll move one of them into a stopper role. But right now we're just going to use all 3 as setup men, 1-inning kind of guys, and see if we can hopefully continue to have one of the better pitching staffs in the American League. Our batting has been the issue each of the first 2 years of this playthrough. We haven't necessarily made a ton of moves to improve things, but we've got a new platoon at catcher, Tyler Soderstrom and Lawrence Butler, after splitting last year between AAA and the majors, have been signed to extensions and given everyday spots in the lineup. Other new additions like Tommy Edman, Gio Urshela, the rookie Cameron Cawley, and Brian Buelvis will get opportunities this year. Our theoretical starting shortstop, Nick Ahmed, is beginning the season on the IL. He is a stopgap, not much of a hitter, but a very good defensive shortstop. But as some of you have noted in the comment section, it would be fantastic if Cameron Cawley, the 23-year-old, goes out there over the next couple of weeks before Ahmed is ready and gets off to a solid start with the bat and says, this shortstop spot is mine, and puts us in a position where we've got a difficult decision to make as far as potentially trading Ahmed away, or perhaps trading away or demoting one of our other infielders. Don't know if Cawley's quite ready. The way he hit in AAA last year in 283 at-bats with a 115 WRC plus indicates he might be. But the way that he hit in AA before we promoted him, where he put up a 55 WRC plus and 262 at-bats, indicates that he may still need a little bit more seasoning. But he is, at least according to our scout, getting close to maxing out the abilities that we think he has. We also have made only one waiver claim this year. We'll wait and see if it goes through over the next couple of days. It would be another relief pitcher to hopefully strengthen our bullpen if we are successful. Other than that, there's a lot of players on the waiver wire, but unfortunately no one that we think is going to make a material difference to our offense. And although we're off to an 0-2 start, losing the first two games against our divisional rival Seattle Mariners, we did have success with our waiver claim. Josh Spores of the Texas organization had been waived, making a little over $2 million. I think he could be a pretty interesting right-handed arm for our bullpen. Ground ball pitcher, throws in the high 90s, and he has over the course of his career been a close to league average-ish type of player. Would tend to think that with our defense, which I think should be pretty respectable behind him, and playing in Oakland, hopefully we can coax better than league average performance out of him working out of our bullpen. And the first series of the season could not have gone worse. 0-4, swept by Seattle in a 4-game series. And Ethan Roberts' Rule 5 acquisition just suffered a torn labrum and is going to be out for the entire season. Well, we've been playing better over the last week plus. We've pulled our record up to 500 at 6-6. But Austin Meadows just suffered a concussion and is going to be out for 10 months. So that is, as I often say, not optimal. Meadows has been an effective offensive player for us the last 2 years. He was going to be in the lineup every day against right-handed pitching, where we think he could have been a pretty useful offensive player for us. Unfortunately, at this point, we are going to have to find someone to replace him. He was our 3-hitter against right-handed pitchers, so it's certainly going to leave a hole in the lineup to no longer have Mr. Meadows around. And there is that $4 million option for Meadows next year that is potentially useful to somebody, but I want to try to give us a little bit of financial flexibility with this team. I don't think we're going to be paying Meadows $4 million next year. Not a lot of options. The only guy we can get for him in all of baseball is Mark Vientos from the Mets, but he's making the major league minimum. We would actually just go ahead and release him. I don't know if we might be able to get the Mets to keep that contract. Yeah, they got a lot of money, so they're willing to keep it. So we're going to just go ahead and dump Austin Meadows to give ourselves a little more financial flexibility this year, which if we're still in the 500 area as we approach the All-Star break, we may need. And as I said, we signed Meadows to that deal. Felt like we had team options to protect us, but $4 million next year or having to pay a $400,000 buyout. Given that he was only a league average guy a year ago and he's going to be a year older, I think it's probably time for us to move on. We're also in a situation where if we think about our salary situation, we're expected to be a lot higher with the salaries next year. So I think it was going to be pretty unlikely that Meadows would be back with us anyways. And we're just going to try to get what we can for him now and move on. And replace Meadows, we brought up the lefty hitting Dominic Canzone, signed him to a minor league deal about 14 months ago, spent all of last year in the minors for us, but certainly looks like he's got a competent-ish type bat against right-handed pitching. Not an optimal solution, but he's less expensive than Meadows, and he's not currently concussed, so he will be the at least short-term solution for us in left field. And Nick Ahmed is ready to come back, and unfortunately the youngster Cameron Coyle has been awful, hitting a .189 in 53 at-bats, 22 WRC plus. He's been about replacement level given his solid defense, but given that we do think he's still got some improvements he can make, notably to his power, his BABIP, we're going to send him back down to AAA for a little bit of seasoning. Doesn't mean that the job is Ahmed's for the entire season, but Nick Ahmed is better defensively, and I admit it's a very small sample size for Coyle, but Ahmed certainly is going to be putting up better than a 22 WRC plus for us. And we've made it through the month of April, and it's kind of going the way that we expected it to go. A 12-13 record, kind of just hanging out slightly below 500, 4 games behind the Rangers in the AL West. And we are 2 games behind the Guardians and the Orioles for the final wild card spot in the American League. Looking at the leaderboards, nobody on the Oakland A's is near the top of the league in any of the key offensive categories. Take a quick early look at our team statistics. Runs scored, we are 11th. Runs allowed, we are 7th. So we certainly haven't been great, but we are a game below Pythagorean expectations. We're a game below 500, expected to be a game above 500. If we are able to kind of improve another couple spots in terms of our offense, maybe get to middle of the pack, kind of 7th, 8th, 9th type of rank, and we're able to improve our pitching a little bit more, maybe get the pitching into the top 5, that would kind of be our formula to potentially have this team competing for a wild card spot if we get really lucky. Feel like the pitching will ultimately be fine. You can see we've got the best bullpen ERA in the AL right now. The starters have kind of been middle of the pack. Defense a bit above average. Base running a bit above average. Taking a look at the starting pitching, Clark Schmidt and Colby Allard and Luis Garcia have all been pretty solid for us. Newcomer Lucas Giolito and holdover J.P. Sears, though, both have earned run averages in the mid-5s that hopefully they'll improve. Taking a look at the bullpen, Clayton Beeter, back from an injury, didn't do well his first outing, as you can tell. A.J. Puck, the new addition, with a 4.66 ERA. Other than those two, everybody in the bullpen's ERA is in the mid-3s or lower at this point. And Gabe Spire with a 1.04 ERA over 8 2/3 innings is perhaps making me regret a little bit not using him more often in a stopper role, but he's still our eighth inning guy right ahead of the closer, Ian Hamilton, and Spire has done a nice job in that role for us thus far in 2026. And we've made it another month to the end of May. We were 500 just a couple days ago, but we lost 2 in a row against Cleveland. So unfortunately, 2 under 500 at this point. We're second place in the AL West, but 9 behind the mighty Rangers. Still lurking 2.5 back in the wild card race. So we are keeping ourselves in the mix, which is kind of what we wanted to do and what we thought we could do. Unfortunately, the young outfielder Lawrence Butler going to be out for 6 weeks with shoulder bursitis. Hitting just .232 for us with an 88 WRC plus. Does have 8 home runs and 9 stolen bases. So when he has hit the ball and been on the base paths, he has tried to make some things happen. But certainly looking at his profile, hoping for a bit more from him offensively when he does get back from that injury. But unfortunately for us, he's likely out through the All-Star break. And with Butler headed to the IL for the next month and a half, we promoted Austin Gauthier. You may remember he was one of our final cuts this year. Not very productive offensively last year in Oakland. We do like his ability to draw walks, and he had been pretty impressive down in AAA to start the season with a OPS of close to 1,200 and a 200 WRC plus. Drew 21 walks in just 26 games. So he's going to be spending some time in right field, and we're putting Tommy Edman into the lineup against right-handed pitching at second base, and then moving Darrell Hernandez into right field, which will tighten up our infield defense even a little bit more. We'll see if we can get this offense going in the month of June. We're definitely down a few guys, which is unfortunate at this point. Butler, as we know, is out for 6 weeks. Roberts out for the year. Steven Matz, who was a minor league free agent signing, was up with us for a good month after the injury to Roberts before he got out with elbow tendonitis, out for another couple months. Mitch Spence likely to move the entire season, but perhaps most importantly, Mason Miller, after that ruptured UCL that cost him all of last year and then had a setback that cost him the first chunk of this year, is in theory just 2 weeks away from perhaps being able to begin a rehab assignment, and adding that arm into our bullpen or our rotation would potentially allow us to improve this team even more, given that we were trying Miller as a starter in spring training a year ago, and he ruptured his UCL. I don't know that I'm going to go for that, but he would be a pitcher with his potentially brilliant stuff, above average movement, and 4-pitch arsenal, in addition to 40 stamina, who we might consider in a stopper role. The issue is just going to be, does he come back with fragile injury proneness after this pretty significant injury to his arm? And we've made it to mid-June. Been another pretty mediocre month for the A's, sitting at 31-34 here on June 13th. So taking a look at the standings, still second place in the AL West, 10 back of the Rangers. Estuary Ruiz, who's led the AL in steals each of our first 2 years of this playthrough, has moved up to third in the league, but he's got back spasms likely to impact him over the next week. We're sitting 3 back behind the final 2 wild card spots in the American League at this point. So kind of performing as expected. Not great, not horrible. The important news, however, is that Mason Miller is ready to begin his rehab assignment. So we are going to send him down to AAA. He has perhaps expectedly come back fragile in terms of his injury proneness, is what it is. Maybe we'll be able to get him into the development lab to improve his strength this offseason. Although, if I remember correctly, we had done that with him the offseason of 2024 to 2025, improved his stamina. He came back healthy, and he did not even make it out of spring training for us in 2025, but looks like we potentially could have him back sometime in early June if all goes well. And that would actually be early July if all goes well. It's already June 13th, so it's no longer early June. And we've got an updated scouting report back on Mason Miller. Very high scouting accuracy. Think that his stuff could actually get a little better. Still has the 4-pitch arsenal. Control still a bit below average. Fragile, as we noted, but still throws in the high 90s. So all things considered, he could have done worse coming out of this injury. He's actually had 2 starts in Las Vegas for us. Probably going to give him at least 1 more and then maybe look to bring him back up into the majors in July. Our big decision right now is, we got a number of big decisions with him. Do we use him as a starter, a closer, a stopper? And now that he's back and healthy, do we also consider moving on from him in trade? I think probably not, given that he's not making crazy money yet. The hope is that he can help us finally get this team over 500. Sitting at 38-40 here on June 29th, we've gotten this team to 500, I think probably 5 or 6 times over the last month and a half, and every time we get to 500, we lose the next game. So still have not been above 500 yet this year, although we've been lingering right around that level for pretty much the entire season. And actually, as I think about it, we were briefly above 500 right when the season started in April. After that 0-4 start, we went on a pretty good run. But in the more meaningful times when we've had 20-plus games under our belt, we've never gotten above 500 over these last couple of months. And the month of June is now in the books at 39-41. We are just about at the midway point. We've slipped to third, 11 behind the Rangers in the AL West, and we are 3.5 out of the final wild card spot. So we are still hanging around. Mason Miller hasn't pitched again since the last time we checked in, so probably going to give him one final start to get a few innings under his belt in AAA, and then look to bring him up in the not too distant future. Taking a look at how the team is performing statistically here, 39-41, we're actually 3 below expectations. We're expected to be above 500, so that's a small positive piece of news. You can see we were a game below 500 in April, a game below 500 in May, and we did improve to a 500 record in June. We are middle of the pack in scoring and offense, 8th in the American League in runs scored. So that was kind of where we hoped we might get with this team. Weren't even really sure that we would do that. The issue is that we're pretty average pitching-wise this year, 7th in runs allowed. Bullpen ERA is 3rd. Starters ERA, however, is 8th, middle of the pack. 3rd in defensive efficiency, 1st in zone rating, so the defense has been pretty good in support of the pitchers, but just not pitching quite as well as we would have hoped. Taking a look at the stats, Clark Schmidt has been solid. The new additions, Giolito and Garcia, have both been okay-ish. J.P. Sears has been good. and the number 5 starter Colby Allard with a 5.31 ERA and a 4-8 record. His spot could definitely be in jeopardy, particularly once Matz is ready to come back. Nick Frasso or Clayton Beater would likely be the people that we would put into that spot right now. But as we've talked about, we do have Mason Miller lurking. And there's part of me that thinks we just bring him up right now for Allard, because although I mentioned he hasn't pitched since the last time we checked in on him, he's basically ready to go. It's been more than 5 days since the last time he went. He's probably only got so many pitches in this arm. We may not want to waste him in AAA. And we've decided to actually promote Mason Miller. Allard demoted to a long relief role, and we sent Clayton Beater back down to AAA. But we might as well see what we can get out of Miller. He's got that 40 stamina now. The fragile injury proneness almost makes me a little leery of putting him into the stopper role. I think it might be best for him if we just pitch him every 5 or 6 days, depending on whether we have a day off in there or not, and try to keep him on a regular schedule and see if maybe he can provide our starting rotation with the boost that we're in pretty dire need of right now. And we got a nice performance from Miller, his first time out in the majors in almost 2 calendar years at this point. 5 innings pitched, only 1 hit, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts through 67 pitches. Game score of 70, was the player of the game in his triumphant-ish return to the majors. Puts us a game below 500 as we reach the midway point of this 2026 season. And we do still have 3 arbitration years ahead of us for Miller. 5.7, 6.6, and 8.1 are his expected figures. I did also just take a look. If we tried to lock him up for a little bit longer, say 5 years, buying out a couple of arbitration years, looking for $11.5 million a year in those out years, so about an $8 million average over 5 years. Given that he's got the injury issues and we've got control of him for 3 more years with arbitration, I'm not going to be real aggressive about trying to sign him to a long-term deal. He still is conceivably someone, particularly if he pitches well over these next 3 months, that may have some trade value again in the off season. If things really go poorly over the next 4 weeks, he could have some trade value during the season, but at 40 and 41, hopefully we will not be sellers as we close in on the trade deadline. And we've gotten our mid-season review at 40 and 41. He says we've been doing a great job with the goal of don't suck completely. Still not making progress to make Mr. Fisher happy as far as our on-base percentage. Unhappy that we haven't signed a big or acquired a big player. Unhappy with us on fan interest. Unhappy of our international amateur fines. And not all that excited about our farm system. That said, I feel like we're making some steady progress. He says he's actually happy with our progress towards the goals and our handling of on-field and front office management. So we're not in a bad spot. Would love to, in the coming weeks before we head into the draft and the All-Star break, to maybe have a sweep of one of these series, these next 3 series we got till we get to the draft, to hopefully get this team over 500. You may remember from the off season that we got lucky And you can see we've also gotten a little lucky that we're now viewed as the 9th farm system in baseball, so making some progress there. But we got lucky in the lottery, and we'll be picking 4th in the draft this year. I believe we were supposed to be about 10th. So the frozen ping pong ball, or the frozen card, was apparently in the hopper for us this year. Didn't get all the way up to 1st, but I'll certainly be pretty pleased with the 4th pick in the draft. Doesn't look like an incredible draft in terms of the pool. We're going to spend some time in just a few moments at the end of this episode highlighting the players who are available for us, and hopefully getting some feedback from those of you who are willing to share it with us. And the good news is we won 2 in a row to get to 42 and 41. So this is certainly the latest in a season we've ever been above 500 in the 2.5 years of this playthrough. Negative news, AJ Puck fractured elbow. His season is over. We did, when we made the trade for him, get the Reds to retain a good chunk of his contract. I know some of you did not like the acquisition, but he's been solid for us out of the bullpen. 2.97 ERA and 41 strikeouts over 30 and a third innings. That said, he has given up 7 home runs, which has tended to be his issue. So overall, he's slightly below replacement level, despite the fact that he's got a 2.77 Sierra. And a day ahead of the draft, we're scuffling along again, 43 and 44. One positive piece of news, Lawrence Butler back from that 1.5 long injury. We're going to send him on a rehab assignment just for a couple days, probably bring him back relatively shortly, but hopefully let him knock the rust off a little bit before we have to make a potentially interesting roster decision. And we've made it to the first-year player draft. We did win yesterday in 10 innings, 8-5 at the Royals. So we are flat-footed 44 and 44 here on July 11th. Interesting for those of you who were with us last year when we did our Buffalo Wings expansion series, our projected pick at the number 4 pick here in the draft is Joe Edwards, 19-year-old shortstop. We'll see whether he's actually on the board when we look to make our pick in the first-year player draft. We're going to go ahead and get the draft started, auto draft into our pick. The draft log, Mitch Eckhart, Nelson Flores, and Grady Emerson were the first 3 picks of the draft. Pretty good-looking starting pitching prospect and a couple of interesting shortstops. So we will see now who we have available. So before we finish up the episode, we'll take a look at the top 3 pitching prospects available. R.J. Cope, a starting pitching prospect, a potential two-way guy, although it looks like his contact and his eye are not going to be great. Is going to have potentially pretty interesting home run power. Looks like he could be a 4-pitch guy, but it's also conceivable he only ends up a 2-pitch guy. Poor level of competition that he's been facing in Georgia. Looks like his stuff could be above average, movement a little above average, control average-ish. 8-0 this year with a sub-1 ERA, but you're going to generally see those types of stats from the big-time pitching prospects. Rob Kelly, a starting pitching prospect, looks like he could have a pretty interesting 4-pitch arsenal. 17 years old, throws in the mid-90s. Stuff could be off the charts. Movement looks pretty average, and he may struggle giving up homers. Looks like his control could be a bit above average. And last, but we hope not least, Steve Southard, 18-year-old, throws in the low to mid 90s, does have high work ethic. He's definitely going to want to get paid. Only a potential 3-pitch arsenal, and we don't even think that sinker is going to be quite major league quality. Think his stuff could be really interesting if that changeup does develop. Movement and control in the average-ish range. Given that we've tended to focus on pitchers in these first couple drafts, hoping that there might be someone interesting among the position players. And we've got 5 position guys that our scout views as 4-star or higher prospects. Israber Stewart, a third baseman. Definitely looks like a third baseman in terms of his ratings. I think the bat could be interesting, plus contact, plus power, decent gap power, and decent eye. Not looking for a ton of money. Doesn't feel like a number 4 overall pick, but not horrible. Keon Johnson, other than the bit of greed that he has, like the leadership, like the adaptability, like the work ethic, looks like he could be a respectable defensive infielder, has some pop in that right-handed bat, and also has a little bit of speed. Kevin Roberts Jr., center fielder, looks like a pretty well-rounded hitting prospect, pretty decent defensive player potentially. Would be a great right fielder, can play center though. Average speed, another guy with some pretty good pop in the bat, decent eye, decent gap power, and good enough contact. So he's certainly interesting. Shortstop Brad McCracken. Don't love the low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic, but a competent defensive player who looks like he could have a pretty interesting bat. And then the other 5-star prospect is the aforementioned Joe Edwards. Looks like a competent-ish infielder. Not a ton of speed, but really interesting power and a really interesting eye. So definitely some interesting opportunities out there. Our scouting director recommends going with Razor Edwards, a guy who is looking for significantly more than slot. So we're going to have some interesting decisions to make. You can see some other familiar names from previous playthroughs. Javorsky Lane Jr. on the list. Tyler Spangler. And I want to say there was a pitcher whose name I was familiar with, Connor Langdon, that were not too far away. And I think that this might be the last draft that is somewhat realistic here in 2026 with players that there's actually something known about. So if you've got any thoughts on which direction we should go in this draft, would love to hear them in the comment section. It's been a kind of as expected season for these Oakland A's. As I mentioned, 500 record now, only 7.5 behind in the division, still in third place, but the Rangers have been struggling with a 2-8 record over their last 10. And we are 3 out of the final wild card spot as we sit here on July 11th. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.